You ever have one of those days where the universe just decides to test every line you swore you'd never cross? Yeah, that was the morning I watched a 73-year-old black man, Elijah Freeman, get pulled over in the richest, whitest neighborhood in the state by a cop who had no idea he was staring down a sitting Supreme Court justice. You'd think this is the setup for some satirical skit, but let me back up a sec because the joke here, if there is one, is on the law itself. Elijah was behind the wheel of his old black Cadillac DeVille, the kind of car that screams both elegance and defiance, rolling slow under the autumn golds, just coming back from his wife's grave. For years he'd been without her, but her words were stitched into his soul. Never bow your head unless it's to lift someone up. On this day, though, there are other kinds of bows. Invisible ones, the kind you learn as a black man in America every time you get a certain look from a patrol car. And that's exactly what happened at the corner of Maple and Birchwood, just a flash of red and blue. No siren, just a quiet order. Pull over now. Elijah did everything right because he always did signaled, hands on the wheel, engine off, window down, just enough. 3 minutes ticked by. The cop didn't get out, just stared from his car like he was waiting for Elijah to get nervous. When he finally stepped out, it was Officer Caldwell, hat low, hand on holster, eyes searching for an excuse. "Is this your car?" he asked, not curious, just baiting. Elijah kept the calm years on the bench had taught him that much. "Yes, sir. May I help you?" Caldwell didn't even look at the license. He didn't want answers. She wanted to put this man in his place. You know what I mean? There's a tone some folks use when suspicion hides behind a fake smile. Elijah said who he was, federal ID and all-associate justice, U.S. Supreme Court, heading to see his grandkids. Caldwell smirked. "So what? You the president too?" Barely glancing at the ID, calling him a liar. When Elijah wouldn't just roll over, Caldwell called for backup, labeled him potentially non-compliant over the radio, which everyone knows is code for get ready for trouble. That's when things turned ugly. "Step out of the car." Elijah asked why, tried to assert his rights. Didn't matter. Caldwell's hand moved to his gun, voice low, dangerous. "I won't say it a third time." Elijah stepped out, back straight, dignity unbroken, and Caldwell shoved him hard against the car. 73 years old, suffering from heart trouble, but to Caldwell, none of that mattered. He frisked Elijah roughly, accusing him of resisting because his attitude wasn't sufficiently broken. Then, right there in the open, Caldwell pressed a button on his body cam and the red light went out. Silence is a tactic, but sometimes silence is a trap. Elijah knew what was happening. He's been in enough courtrooms to spot a setup. He tried to memorize every detail, the plate number, the wind, the angle of the sun, anything that might prove his innocence later. But then a twist. Across the street, a man stepped onto his porch, phone out, camera rolling. Suddenly, Caldwell wasn't just performing for himself, had an audience. And you could see the calculation in his eyes. Backup Araveda second officer, Brennan, older, quieter, a face Elijah recognized from a lawsuit where he'd refused to testify about bias in his department. Brennan looked at Elijah, realized who he was, but kept his mouth shut. That's the game. Silence on top of silence, stacking up until truth disappears. "Sit on the curb," Brennan ordered, pretending not to know the man before him. And when Elijah didn't, when he stood his ground, the label changed from non-compliant to potential threat. The handcuffs came out, the old man was shoved in the back of the patrol car. No Miranda rights, no charge. Just suspicion. But you want a real twist? The next stop wasn't the station, it was a quiet street. No cameras. Caldwell searched the Cadillac, came back holding a bag of white powder. "Suspected narcotics," he announced into his radio, never looking Elijah in the eye. Elijah didn't bother protesting. He knew where that powder came from, and it wasn't his trunk. That's when you stop being a man and start being a headline. At the station, the process was swift, evidence bagged, a rushed report. Elijah locked in a holding cell, denied medical care as his heart started to fail. No urgent need, Caldwell wrote, though anyone could see Elijah was struggling. Minutes turned into an hour. Finally, as Elijah collapsed, a nurse flagged an ER transfer. In the chaos, one Dr. Raymond Lynn, a former federal advisor, recognized Elijah and demanded the cuffs be removed. He's a Supreme Court justice. Lynn shouted. The cop just shrugged. Anybody can say that. But a doctor's oath goes deeper than a badge. Lynn snapped a photo, sent it to a contact in the Department of Justice. Within the hour, Elijah's family arrived his son Michael, a civil rights attorney, and Eliza Chun, a journalist. They found the ICU locked down, police blocking entry, no answers, just more stone walls. So Michael recorded everything is denied access, the intimidation, the stonewalling. Sent it to the press. Within hours, the story was blowing up. Why is a Supreme Court justice being treated like a nobody? And that's where the cracks in the system started to show. Hospital staff began leaking records, showing delays in care, handcuffs left on too long, Caldwell's signature denying emergency treatment. Eliza found case after case of complaints, hundreds, nearly all from people of color vanished, buried, withdrawn for technical reasons. The pattern was clear. Caldwell was a symptom, not a cause. The real disease was a system that erased dissent with paperwork. In a cinematic twist, a letter arrived handwritten, trembling addressed to Elijah from Caldwell's own mother. She was once an activist, now the mother of a cop she no longer recognized. I only want you to know that some of us once stood on the same side as you, only to watch our own children end up on the other. It hit harder than any lawsuit that let Tara Mother's confession that hate is learned, not born, and the system teaches well. With the family gathering evidence, Michael tracked down the raw body cam footage on a hidden server. Brady Marsh, the old technician, handed it over not for money, not for justice, just so it wouldn't disappear again. They now had the truth in their hands. But that brought more threats, anonymous messages, prosecutors circling, smear campaigns on TV calling Elijah senile. Every attack was meant to push the family into silence. But they didn't back down. Elijah hooked up to heart monitors and the ICU started dictating his legal defense, citing every violation, preparing for a fight not just for himself, but for every voice that had been erased. The final scene? Chief Morris himself, the department head, arrived at Elijah's bedside with a full DARA hush agreement. Drop this, don't sue, and we'll call it mistaken identity. No mention of Officer Caldwell. No apology. Just silence. Elijah turned him down, said quietly, I'm not here to save a reputation. I'm here to save the truth. Morris, slick as ever, replied, truth isn't what's real. It's what people believe. And what they believe depends on who speaks first. But the Freeman family had already decided. They'd take the risk, release the footage, let the story go public. Eliza, Michael, even Elijah's granddaughter Maya, they all played a part. And when the system realized it couldn't silence them, it tried intimidation. Thinly veiled threats against the grandkids at school. Calls in the night. But by then, the momentum had shifted. People were paying attention. Small voices started joining in others who'd been silenced, now stepping forward, unwilling to be erased. So here's the question I can't stop thinking about: if Elijah Freeman hadn't been a Supreme Court justice, if he'd just been any other black grandfather driving home from the cemetery, would we even know his name? Or would he be another blank page, another lost story buried in the system? Where's the line between a mistake and a message sent on purpose? And how many times does a community have to rise up before the system listens for real? Let me know what you think. Drop your thoughts below. Tell me where you draw the line between justice and survival, between silence and speaking out. Because the truth is, this isn't just Elijah Freeman's story, it's the story of every voice that refuses to bow its head.